Uh, this is weird. I welcome everybody to the HG podcast. I don't know which camera to look at. We have with us here today, uh, Dr. Eric Ding, epidemiologist. So I've been following you on Twitter for a long time. I'm not sure how I came upon your tweets, but ever since this whole virus kind of story broke in Wuhan from the very origins, you were sounding the alarms, and I was very keen to everything you were saying. And I have to say, you have to feel at least a little bit I don't want to say vindicated because it's a horrible thing, but you were right, right? I mean, you were right.
I know it's a bittersweet thing. First of all, I remember um, this thing like it's like a fog. Like I feel like our friends have been saying like there's decades in which nothing happens, and then there's weeks in which decades happen. And I feel like January was like 2 years ago, and now
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's like a total blur, and I can't even like fathom like how we even got here. And I feel like I've aged so much during that time. And
That's
and
funny.
along the way, I remember when we were trying to shut down, trying to petition to shut down Seattle Comic-Con.
Right, right. Yeah, that seems like ages ago.
That was ages ago.
And people thought we were crazy.
Yeah, and then now people are like, oh yeah, we better shut down everything, and like
Right.
90% of the country is.
Let me give some context. This was back in, gosh, I don't even remember. Seattle was like, hey, and it was in Seattle, which was like the origin of the coronavirus in the United States.
Yeah.
So, Seattle Comic Con was like, hey guys, we know that there's this coronavirus thing, but we are gonna still do Comic Con. And then I first saw it from you. You're like, this is insane. You guys have to cancel this. And then I quote tweeted it. And at the time, I hear this kind of sentiment echoed a lot, and it's absolutely true. It's like, if you're on time, people say you are fear mongering, and if you're on time, you're way too late.
Yeah.
So how did you, as an early alarm, sounding the alarms way before most? I mean, how did you respond to people calling you a fear monger and a hack and all these?
It was pretty rough because like first of all, I had like more inside details than just that one paper with a big R naught of 3.8, which by the way, the latest review
Can you unpack that? What is 3.8? What does 3.8 mean?
3.8 is like the reproductive number. It means for every infected person, that person infects 3.8 additional people. And just for context, the reproductive number of the common seasonal flu is 1.3. So 3.8 is like almost 3 times higher. But it's not just 3 times higher. It's, remember, for every infected person, 3.8 additional people. So this is exponentially much more than 3 times. Um, and so I knew this epidemic was happening in early January because I had relatives in China. I was originally born there, but I'm all American. But they tell me this is weird pneumonia. People are like dying, getting sick, and people are panicking, and it's a paranoia no one's ever like experienced before. And like when you hear that, in China, lots of crazy things happen. But to hear that kind of thing, it's not normal. But you can't shout just based on these kind of anecdotes, right?
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's like, it's bad, but how bad? And so you're like grasping for like info, how bad? And then that paper came out, 3.8, and I'm like, whoa. But the problem is, at that point, I only had like 2,000 followers on Twitter. I was never a big Twitter person. I actually have a 5.5 million person Facebook page for my cancer campaign.
Wow.
I actually didn't. I actually think that Facebook is not the best medium. If you want to reach reporters and world leaders and influencers, you have to use Twitter. But my Twitter was like nothing. So I couldn't just whimper, because most scientists, when they post on Twitter, they just whimper it. And it's like, oh, there's a suggestive evidence that there potentially could be a probability of blah, blah, blah. No, come on. No one's going to listen to that. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a little crazy thread together, and it was like just before my bedtime, I saw this paper. I was like, I did a big, deep, I got out of bed and I took a deep sigh and tapped it out. And during that time, I tapped out one post that was a little bit off because I misread another paper, but I quickly deleted that. But the gist was, it's gonna be really, really bad, and I knew it was gonna be bad because like I had this other data from China that no one else had, because we wouldn't find it on Twitter or American social media. It's only on Chinese social media that my cousins told me. And so, but then the people called me fearmonger. It's a preprint. It's not peer reviewed yet. Blah blah. People were like trying to like fact check me or lane check me. It's like, you're an epidemiologist, but you're not a infectious disease epidemiologist.
So,
and then there's like, oh, you're a nutritionist,
right?
They failed to neglect that I actually have a PhD in epidemiology first,
which is a slam dunk. That's right up your lane. That is literally your lane.
Yeah, it is. But the thing is, they say, oh, he has a PhD in nutrition, which is true too, because I got a second PhD in nutrition, and then I went to medical school.
How many PhDs does this guy have?
Because somewhere along the line, I realized, oh shit, I went off the deep end. But people like also told like these half truths, like, oh, he's a nutritionist. Oh, he has no, which is technically true, but they it's kind of like when there's a lie and there's a half truth, and half truths are just as bad as a lie sometimes. So,
well, welcome to Twitter. I will tell you,
Right.
it's a hellhole, but it worked.
I had a lot of pressure, and my people at Harvard were like, "What the hell were you doing there?"
Right.
And I was like, "Isn't it free speech?" It's like, if I see smoke, I can shout. I can stand up and shout. I see there might be fire, guys, and there's clearly evidence of smoke because even the WHO was concerned. And at that point, they hadn't declared emergency. So then my next agenda was like, declare a public health emergency of international concern. And that took like 5 days, but finally they did. So then finally, like, people kind of woke up after that. But, oh, by the way, in the middle of that, between me tweeting that and the WHO declaring, that's when all the insider trading among those senators happened.
Oh.
Because apparently they got a briefing around the 23rd or something. So, and they sold their stock on the 24th or 25th. And I tweeted it like just a few days earlier, around the 20th.
So you, as someone who understands the value of that information, they deny having insider traded. Can you say from the outside they most definitely, like, how
I can't say for sure. So it's proven back they had there's a special Senate confidential briefing from like CDC and NIH leaders. So there was definitely a briefing. Now, the problem is, like, it's hard to say whether they truly inside traded, because hell, they could have read my tweet and then sold the stock. I don't know. And there's other people, there's other news. It's not like it's confidential news. It was just out there in the, you just have to read the tea leaves to find it, right? And I doubt the senators
they weren't that savvy
from China, per se.
Exactly.
But they did have a briefing, and so that's why it is a little suspicious. But anyways,
before we get started with today's episode, it is brought to you by Omax Cryo Freeze. Living with chronic pain is the worst. It's more than a feeling of discomfort. It can affect your whole life. Many of my listeners probably have some type of pain that has been preventing them from relaxing, sleeping, or stopping them from exercising. Perhaps it's been going on for a few weeks now and hasn't improved with any treatment they've tried. Enter Omax Health. If you're looking to get rid of nagging muscle and joint pain immediately while providing long-lasting recovery, then you need to try the natural breakthrough pain relief solution CryoFreeze CBD roll-on developed by Omax Health. This non-prescription triple-action pain relief roll-on is specifically formulated to block pain receptors, reduce inflammation, and improve muscle and joint flexibility. The best part is it's 100% natural, CBD powered, a remedy that works its magic within 10 minutes of application, and relief lasts up to 8 hours, much longer than over-the-counter products. I'm a big fat guy and sometimes my knees hurt, and I'll just take a little cryo, rub it into my knees, and it actually feels better. Oh, Max Health is offering my listeners 20% off a full bottle of cryo-free CBD pain relief roll-on, plus free shipping. This discount also applies towards any product site-wide. Just go to omaxhealth.com today and enter the code H3. That's omaxhealth.com. And enter code H3 to get 20% off CryoFreeze and site-wide. Still not sold? I could tell you pro athletes such as PGA pro golfer Kyle Stanley used CryoFreeze CBD to recover both on and off the course. And go look at the product reviews. They've got over a 95% 5-star rating on the page after page of customers saying they've tried it. And Omax CryoFreeze is so good, they're now buying it for their family and friends too. Anyone, from athletes to Grandma Josie, can benefit from this immediate pain relief. You have pain that won't go away, and you qualify for Omax CryoFreeze. Simply roll it over when it hurts and ice out the pain. No messy cream or horrible fragrance like some of these other products. CryoFreeze works within 10 minutes of application, improving physical training, recovery, and performance. So go to omaxhealth.com, enter code H3, and get 20% off CryoFreeze and site-wide. I'm telling you, this product is the real deal. So go to omaxhealth.com and enter code H3 to get 20% off site-wide. Let's back up. We've got here a PhD in epidemiology, which is right up your lane. I mean, epidemiology is the study of epidemics, right? It's about viruses.
How do you end up in that lane?
How did I end up in that? Well, I was a normal kid who played a lot of video games as a kid. I graduated when I was 18, but when I was 17 years old, they actually discovered a tumor the size of a baseball. And so it took out like several organs. It took out my thymus, part of my outer sheath of my heart, and part of my right lung, because they thought I had this big cancer. And at first they thought I had literally was going to die in 5 years because they thought it was a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is pretty terminal. Luckily it wasn't, but it jolted me awake that, God, I got to stop being this video gamer 18-year-old kid and actually do something with my life now that I got a second chance at life. And so I said, I'm going to go to medical school. So I went to Hopkins. But first year, I fell in love with this thing called epidemiology. It was fascinating. You can look at patterns of disease, and you can statistically adjust for lots of different things to get the causal effect of things. I was like, you know what? I'm going to put medical school on the side for pause. I'm going to go get my PhD in epidemiology. So I entered Harvard as one of the youngest students in my doctoral program. And then along the way, they, a year into it, they're like, hey, you want to do another one in nutrition? It's like, is that a lot more work? Yeah, it's double the work, but it's free. It's no extra tuition. I was like, sure, why not? And then, long story short, I fell in love with both. I wasn't an infectious disease epidemiologist. I was a cancer and diabetes epidemiologist, but it's still huge amounts of data. And along the way, I was a whistleblower against Vioxx, the drug that was sold and killed a lot of people. It was $1 billion Merck drug, and we showed that Merck knew about it. And then I said, I want to graduate. And they're like, you're kidding me. You're 23 years old. And most people do one of these doctoral programs in 5 years. You're doing two of them in 2.5 years. I was like, yeah. And I eventually had to convince my advisor, my second advisor, and the department chair of both epidemiology and nutrition to let me graduate. So I finished both my PhDs in 2.5 years when I was 23 years old. And so this was me. Remember, I thought I only had 5 years to live kind of mentality.
Right.
So this is but I've always been kind of chasing, whether it's this Vioxx whistleblowing, because Merck knew about the dangers of Vioxx several years. It was before it was pulled off the market, but they kept selling it. And and if you look at the tea leaves, if you flip one coin for 5 coins and it's all heads, maybe it's by chance. But if you flip 20 coins and they're all consistently heads, there's something wrong, right? And it's kind of like that intuition when you see all that data going the wrong direction. You see that, and that's kind of like me. I'm a really curious guy, and I dug into that kind of thing. And
so let me ask you about this is you're in such a unique position to comment this as someone who knows people in China and is a PhD in epidemiology. So I want to start, first of all, let's talk about wet markets, okay? So we're often hearing that a wet market was the origin of this novel coronavirus? First of all, can you explain to me what is a wet market?
Wet market is something you don't have in the States. It's basically a market where you buy live animals, like live chickens, live ducks,
For
live
consumption.
eels. Yeah, to eat. Like
Mm.
instead of like going to a grocery store and there's a Purdue chicken that's like, air chilled in this plastic packaging. There is a chicken, you grab it by neck. Oh, you want this chicken? Okay, they cut its head off and they
Wow.
pluck off the feathers and then you take it home.
So what is so dangerous about these wet markets?
Yeah, because you're literally like cutting off chickens' heads and cutting off you're literally slaughterhouse. It's like a live slaughterhouse in front of you. It's like I would like 3 eels, 2 ducks, and this, this other weird animal that whatever it is that they're trading, pangolins or something. Um, and so it's literally a live slaughterhouse, and they slaughter the animals in front of you, whether it's fish or these other farm animals. And so it's a very different thing where most Americans can't even imagine. It's very bloody, it's very nasty. It's just how it is. It's fresh from the market, literally.
So what is so dangerous about these wet markets? Are they responsible for breeding, for example, the coronavirus
Yeah,
and
it's
and
very
other viruses?
possible. First of all, there's a lot of fecal matter. The animals that are there, they poop, and poop carries a lot of viruses. And and of course, you're exchanging animals. They're like penned up together. They're not. It's not like a zoo where all these animals have space to roam. They're literally locked in cages, and or just thrown in big cages all together. So they are basically really close together, animals to animals, and people are grabbing them. Sometimes you chase around the chicken trying to catch one, and you grab one, and you try to like, oh, you want this one? No, I want that one. And you put it down, you pick up another one, and so you're literally touching all these different animals,
Mm.
and this is what allows potentially a virus to jump between, you know, a a bat and a chicken and
Mm.
a duck and some frogs,
Mm.
and then jump to you. And so it's a circus. So that's why it's very plausible it came from there. At the same time, who knows? In China, it could literally come from anywhere because the population density is just so high, and people go out into the wilderness to hunt and bring back food as well. So
So, do you think that these wet markets should be shut down by China, or do you think that it's just kind of a fact of life over there? What's the solution here?
it's
Does
so
it help?
common. Like they are shutting them down, but it is really hard to enforce.
Because what
It's probably like getting into like a gun topic here. Like, right? It's
well,
a part of the culture probably.
right, and well, what I've heard is that the wet market industry, like you were saying, it's hard for Americans to fathom, but there it's like you know, several $100 billion industry there that provides food to like a large percent of the population of China because there's just so many people to feed. So it's not something that you can easily just shut off. It's not like a pastime. It's actually people need these wet markets to eat because there's so many people there.
Yeah, there is. And grocery stores, and it's not what you imagine. It's not Whole Foods. It's not even like Giant or Stop or Safeway. It's a very different world.
Hmm.
So I think food to sanitation and hygiene, it's a different culture.
Mhm.
It's
So is it not? It's naive in other words for us Westerners to start demanding China to close
you
down
have to
wet markets.
realize, for example, China has half the farmland as the U.S., but it
Hmm.
has 4 times the population. So every square inch of land, every acre has to feed, instead of one person in the US, has to feed 8 people in China for the same amount of farmland. And so farming intensity is incredibly dense. Um, it's just, and you have to feed these urban centers. And Wuhan as a city would probably be the second largest city in America right now. But in China, it's just a
Just
medium
another
sized city.
That's yeah. So I think that's something interesting to keep in mind is just how different it is. Um, the wet market sounds like a terrible place. Honestly, for me, I think if I walked there, I would be horrified. But it's just a fact of life over there. Um, so what about this thing? People keep saying it came from bats. Is there any truth to that? Did the coronavirus come from a dude eating bat soup?
No, it doesn't come from bat soup because you can't eat it get it from a soup. First of all, the soup by definition kills the viruses
Because it's cooked.
because this virus degrades very easily in heat and humidity. The issue is it's similar to the bat, but at the same time, you could it's more like a cousin of the bat. So a cousin means like there's a common ancestor in which from it diverged, right? Like you're related to your cousin not from your mom, but from your grandmother. So the issue is who's this grandparent species that it jumped from. And you can tell by how viruses evolve. This is actually, by the way, how we know that in Washington State, when the outbreak finally was discovered, not just the first case, but the outbreak, they realized it actually was derived from that same case. And you know that cruise ship off the coast of California, that cruise ship was also derived from the Washington case because you could see how it derived. It came from the cruise ship. The cruise ship came from the Washington State case, not from another one of the new cases from.
So it was already here.
It was already here, and you can tell by the evolutionary lineage. So the evolutionary lineage show that yes, it's close to the bat, but there's many. We need to find a direct ancestor, and we still have not found the direct ancestor yet. Maybe if we just hunt for more bats, eventually we'll find it, but we haven't found it yet. And to really like disprove any conspiracy theories about bioengineering, the ultimate, the holy grail is to find this immediate ancestor. And sometimes it takes time. Like for MERS, they thought it came from camels or something, but then like 2 years later, they eventually found that it actually came from Jordan, from a different species of animals. The cannibals was just camels just a reservoir. But you need to find a direct ancestor, not the cousin ancestor. And the bats are like right now, the closest bat version is a cousin of it. We need to find a direct ancestor.
And so what I think you touched on there briefly is that in Wuhan there is an institute of virology there, and there are conspiracy theories that claim that this virus is potentially man-made and
as a weapon.
As it could have been as a weapon. It could have just someone there accidentally got infected. It was an accident, and then So is there any credence to that?
There's just as much as that as it was aliens. Like there's no proof. Like it's like circumstantial evidence. Like you murdered someone because you were attending the same party in which this person disappeared from. It's like, well, there's hundreds of people who were also there. Just because I was there, also there, doesn't mean that just because I was near attending the same ballroom party, that I was, circumstantial is not admissible in the court of law. And again, it's in China, it's such a high density of things.
That's not even the most probable.
It's not even like Wuhan is a major city. It has the biggest wet markets, and it's one of the most industrial centers. It's also where a lot of pharmaceutical companies are also made, and it's an industrial heartland, and that's why they also had this major institute of virology there. If for some reason, like if this was like in Tibet, and this epidemic started in this teeny tiny corner of remote Tibet, and the Virology Institute is also in that part of remote Tibet, maybe. But this is like Wuhan is like everything's in. It's like New York City. Everything.
There's like 11 million people live there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you think about like a city the size of New York, it's like, well, of course there's an Institute of Virology in the city of New York. It's a huge city.
It's not a big deal because like there's so many things in New York and so many things in DC and so many things.
Again, I think it really just comes from from not understanding China. It's the same thing as this wet market. It's hard to imagine. It's just such a different world. It seems like out there.
Right.
And again, there's no
But you're saying
evidence
there's a
for it.
chance.
So
I'm not. I'm saying there's just as much a chance as some aliens. Like there is things we haven't solved. Like, and again, I am absolutely not a conspiracy theorist. Like there is years ago, someone did engineer the old SARS one. You know, in the SARS epidemic 2003. In 2009 or 2010, in a Proceedings of National Academy of Science, a major journal, someone did insert a few like mutations just for fun to see if they could make the old SARS more virulent, and they did. And this mutation they inserted was a furin mutation, and so the old SARS never had it, but somehow the new SARS has one. And so the question is, how did that one get there? And so what we need to find is the animal that carried it. And it's very easy to like have these mutations. You know, they're just like a few amino acid. It's very natural. It can easily happen. But again, we kind of need to find the host animal that was a direct ancestor of it to really put it away. But again, I don't, at this point right now, it's almost moot. Like, you know, it's a pandemic. It's killing everybody in every single country. And I think, you know, we'll let the virologists duke it out. And there's no point speculating or chasing it because there is no other evidence. There's no evidence in any way or shape or form whatsoever. And it's kind of pointless to argue it. So I'm absolutely for the last time against any conspiracy theories. And I think it's a waste of time to
Over it.
give it more air.
let me ask you this: how does like, let's say, a bat give a human a virus? Is it like breath? Is it breathing? Poop. So someone
You touch with poop.
and then he touched his mouth or something like that.
Yeah, and then you go, you pick your nose. And
That would they? And then and so
eyes. I don't know.
And is that true? Is that true also of other when new viruses enter, like cross?
Yeah, it's very common.
It's all.
For example,
it's poop.
someone
It's
did a
just
study
poop.
in bats and people who are actually in contact with bats. There's remote villages that are very close to these bat caves. Okay, and they thought like, oh, and they discovered like these bats had like hundreds of viruses, and they're like, what's the chance that it jumped into these villages that are adjacent to them? And someone did an experiment, and they realized these people were carrying like dozens and dozens of these coronaviruses and other viruses that these bats were carrying, and it just so happened that most of them were mild viruses, right? Were just kind of inert and you just carry it, and so in some ways, like that just proves like we just found like a remote village that had hundreds, dozens or hundreds of these bat viruses that exist in bat population, and these people were living with it. It just so happened it didn't kill them at a high rate.
So in
that
the
just
case,
supports the fact that it probably came from another animal, and it's just this one unlucky virus hit us.
and is this particular virus, the COVID-19, is this a particular malicious virus? Does this kind of transmission, in other words, does this kind of transmission happen fairly commonly, and this is just the rare exception where it's actually quite deadly and contagious, or is this a rare occurrence?
This is the exception because, as I was saying, like they found so many other viruses that these people in these villages next to these bat caves were having. It just literally, this wet market's been around for, years, for, decades. And it just finally, we got unlucky and one of a really bad one jumped from animals to humans, and Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
So what happens if, let's say, there's a lot of talk in the United States, kind of comes and goes, but there's a lot of politicians, because it's easy to look at the economy, and when the world shuts down, it's easy to see the immediate damage and impact of shutting the whole economy down. I mean, just for example, today, another 6.6 million people claimed unemployment for a total. I think there's like 10% now. The official number is. It's probably much higher than that of unemployment in the United States. So it's easy to look at that and say, as Trump and some of his associates say, is we can't let the cure be worse than the disease, which is I've heard that phrase used around when
Yeah.
it comes to chemotherapy and stuff like that. So they're kind of comparing it to like some kind of barbaric cure. What does it look like if we just say, you know what, it's got a 2% mortality rate. Let's just continue living. Let it do its thing. We've lived with the flu. This isn't much worse than the flu. Let's just like it's just not worth shutting down the
Let
world.
it go or
Just
run
let it
wild.
do its thing. Yeah. So what does that look like? How bad is that?
Yeah. Yeah, this argument, by the way, first of all, it's you either destroy the economy or just kill a lot of people. I don't think it's like an either or black and white thing, and I'll explain why. So first of all, if you let it just do its course and let nature have its way with us without doing any containment, mitigation, or lockdowns or whatsoever, it's not just the deaths. By the way, it's 2% deaths if you are treated and keep it contained. But the death, this mortality, this case mortality ratio, it's not a set amount. Basically what happens is that if you don't treat anyone with ventilators, right? If a country has no ventilators like Iran, you're gonna have really, really high mortality. Or if you run out of ventilators, that you're over capacity, you're out of oxygen tanks, which by the way, a lot of these hospitals are also running low on oxygen tanks for all these patients. Then those people will die. And so, but if you keep it in check and you be able to treat enough people, then it's lower. So, and what happened is like, Italy is approaching like 9-10% mortality, and same in like France. And the reason is they're just completely swamped. This is a flatten the curve thing. They're completely over hospital capacity, and any excess is, well, we're out of ventilators, you die. And even ventilators, by the way, is not enough.
So it is quite an insidious infection.
It
If you
is.
had to,
And
if you had to
so-
guess before modern science, if this kind of virus swept through, let's say 300 years ago, what kind of mortality rate would we be looking at?
we'll probably have like 15, 20%.
Wow. So that is
Well, because look, a lot of people have shortness of breath, right? And right now, a lot of the shortness of breath can be ameliorated by oxygen. There's oxygen like in a mask, and there's oxygen like up your nose, right? Up your nose, down directly. And then there's intubation, and then we have ECMO machines, which is extracorporeal, which means outside of your body membrane oxygenation. It's like kidney dialysis, but instead of dialysis, it's to give you oxygen in your blood. So, instead of cleaning your blood, it's to give your oxygen blood outside into a machine and then puts it back inside you. That's pretty insane.
Yeah, that sounds pretty high tech.
And most hospitals only have like a few, if at all. Rural hospitals don't have any. And they're really expensive and really labor intensive to maintain for someone to use it. So again, we have all this modern medicine. Sometimes we can treat the symptoms, but we can at least prolong people's lives. And long time ago, if it's just we would just like destroy a lot. This is what kind of the bubonic plague was, the Black Death plague.
Wow. So you think you put this on the same level of
not
kind
on
of
the exact same level, not on the same level. But what I'm saying is,
unchecked.
Remember the Spanish flu, which is not really Spanish. It just Spain did the best testing and they found it. The flu influenza of 1918, the one that ravaged the world during the middle of World War I, it killed like millions and millions and millions of people. I think up to like double-digit millions in the teens. But in the middle of World War One,
there's not much
kind
you
of like
can do
it
for
was like a
people
lost
then.
signal.
Yeah.
But this could easily be like that. And again, also it maims a lot of people. Like they're scarred, and these people who are on ventilators, some of them for like 4 weeks in China and here in the States as well, like they're like disabled for a long time. It takes a lot of time for them to recover. And so I want you to think about this. It will kill a lot of people, not just 2%, but above 5%, maybe 10% if you just let it just blow through a population. It'll disable and maim a lot of people. Like, you know, they'll be so weak that they won't be able to go to work, right? And again, it's not just old people. Like in the CDC report just last week, compared to someone with no risk factors, someone with diabetes has 17-fold higher odds of being admitted to the ICU. A diabetic person has a diabetic person who gets infected versus a non-diabetic person, like healthy, 17 higher fold chance of being admitted to the ICU. That's insane. That's larger than smoking causes lung cancer. You know, that's more than obesity causes diabetes. That's odds ratio of 17, relative risk of 17 is just off the charts.
Very dangerous for people
and so
with
this is also the problem. Like in the South right now, you know, the South is known for the stroke belt, a lot of diabetes. Their mortality is much higher, even in young people, than compared to like the young adult mortality in like other New England states or Colorado. Young adult mortality in the South is really high, and it's because that there's so many other comorbidities. You know, COPD, asthma, smoking, diabetes, high blood pressure is also a major killer of COVID patients. Heart disease. If you add them up, between anyone who has either asthma, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, kidney damage, liver disease, any sort of emphysema or any of these diseases, and now who's left? Who doesn't have it? In the U.S., especially in the Deep South, that's not many people left. Almost everyone in the Deep South, like I'm not saying everyone, but a large majority, I would say more than 50%, maybe even 2/3, have one of these risk factors that will put them in severe, debilitating state in ICU at best. And so now, to answer your question, well, what will happen? A lot of people will die. A lot of people will also completely overswarm the hospitals and be on ventilators for like weeks and weeks. Because actually, in certain ways, someone who enters a hospital and dies immediately, or someone who never enters the hospital and dies at home, costs almost no money, right? But someone who's in the ICU, hospitalized in a bed for like weeks and weeks and weeks, you know hospital bills. Yeah. It locks up the hospital bills, and then the hospital beds. And then if you have a heart attack, or if you had a stroke, and you need to go to the ER, and you need to get emergency surgery, bypass surgery, or some other major procedure to save your life, but the ER is full, guess what? You're gonna die too, even though you don't have COVID, right? If you have a diabetic blood sugar emergency, asthma, allergy emergency, any sort of opioid overdose, you're going to die too, because the ER and the hospital beds are full. And this is the problem. It will literally, directly kill, because of the virus and your risk factors that puts you a high chance of dying or being debilitated, but also kill people who don't even have the virus at all, but they will die of cancer, heart attacks, strokes, drug overdoses.
It sounds like such a terrifying hellscape that once it starts ravaging, then people are going to be so terrified and scared to go outside, the economy is going to be shutting down even worse.
Exactly. So my answer is, it's not you're choosing between saving lives and saving the economy. Saving lives will also save the economy, because
there's only one way
keeping
out.
them home and keeping them relatively healthy at home until this thing is over, right? Because you're basically, there's a hurricane outside. You either throw everyone in the hurricane and let half of them get, killed by a flying, branch, or you keep everyone inside until the storm is over.
Right.
And then, they can go back to work.
So this premise that we hear in your opinion not a true not an accurate premise at all. It's one. There's
way
only
off.
one way out, really, which
Hey
is
guys,
to defeat the virus.
on that on this very uplifting note, we're past our break time, so let's take a quick break and we can jump right back in.
Alrighty. So we will be right back with Dr. Eric Ding. We will continue our discussion about COVID-19 and all things virus here on the H3 podcast. Thank you to Stamps.com for sponsoring this episode. For all of our sake, we must be avoiding crowds. Now you have a better excuse than ever to be using Stamps.com. Why go to the post office and catch coronavirus when you can do it online at Stamps.com? That's in addition to the discounts and the money saving that you'll get through Stamps.com. You can print postage on demand, skip lines, crowds. It's much more convenient, and also you will survive. Survival above all. Stamps.com brings all the services of the U.S. Postal Service right to your computer and the safety and comfort of your home, office, or anywhere else you are hunkering down right now. Whether you're a small business sending invoices or an online seller shipping out product, or you're just working from home and need to mail stuff, Stamps.com can handle it all with ease. Simply use your computer to print official U.S. postage 24/7 for any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere you want to send. Once your mail is ready, you just leave it for your mail carrier, schedule a free pickup, or drop it off in the mailbox. No human contact is required. It's that simple. And like I said, with Stamps.com, you get great discounts too. That's 5 cents off every first class stamp and up to 40% off USPS shipping rates. That was not part of the copy read. That was my own ad lib. And now, in addition to offering discounted U.S. Postal Service rates, Stamps.com also offers UPS services with discount rates up to 62%. Whoa. Plus, with Stamps.com, you won't even have to pay UPS residual surcharge. Stamps.com is a no-brainer, especially now, saving you time and money and keeping you safe in these crazy times. So, for our listeners, go to get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale without any long-term commitment. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in H3. That's Stamps.com. Enter H3. Stay safe, my friends, with Stamps.com. You know I love that Quip electric toothbrush. Quip, the makers of the Quip electric toothbrush, want you to know the one single discovery that matters the most for your dental care. It is simply this, that if you have good habits, you are good. That means that brushing for 2 minutes twice a day and flossing regularly, no matter what brand you use, Quip makes it simple, starting with an electric toothbrush, refillable floss, and anti-cavity toothpaste. Quip's electric brush has a sensitive sonic vibration with a built-in timer and 30-second pulses that guide a full and even clean. The Quip floss dispenser comes with pre-marked string to help you use just enough. Plus, Quip delivers fresh brush heads, floss, and toothpaste refills to your door every 3 months with free shipping, so your routine is always right and your mouth is always frickin' clean. Join over 3 million healthy mouths and get Quip today, starting at $25 only. This is the way to go. The Quip electric toothbrush, I'm just going to give you my personal endorsement right now. I don't use any other toothbrush because the bristles are soft, made of rubber, gentle on my gums. Gives me a perfect brush. It tells me exactly how long I need to brush. It's the best brush in the game. And at $25, you're not going to find a better brush. They got a special offer. If you go to getquip.com/H3 right now, you'll get your first refill for free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/H3, spelled GETQUIP.com/H3. That's Quip, the Good Habits Company. All right. So we are back with Dr. Eric Ding here with us. I keep looking between the cameras. It's so unusual.
so
This is my
confusing.
first Zoom interview, so so we were talking about the false premise of we can fix the economy and the virus. It doesn't seem like that is an option. And the way you described it is actually even worse than I imagined.
It's pretty terrifying.
And well, people have been saying from the very beginning, well, you know, our very own president only, I don't know, like, seems like years ago now, but was, I don't know if it was a month or even less, said that the flu kills 50,000 people a year. We don't even worry about that. This isn't even as bad as the flu. What how do you react when you hear people saying that, it's just the flu
It's
here,
just
guys?
the flu. That line. Here, I have 10 different points.
Well, I think what we just spoke about pretty much shut that point down, but
Yeah. Well, first of all, here's the differences. We already talked the reproductive number. The flu has a 1.3 reproductive number, and this one has anywhere between 2 and 4. And there's a new study that just said it was a 5.7. So it's high. Let's just say it's at least twice, if not 3 times higher in reproductive coefficient. And again, for every cycle, instead of 1.3 additional people, it's 3 additional people. So it spreads much faster. The flu. Many of you actually have background immunity because you've had the flu before. You've had a related cousin of this year's strain. So you have some partial immunity. The flu, also you have a vaccine. Now, it's not perfect every year because the flu mutates really fast. This is why it's hard. We have to have a new vaccine every year. But at least it's 50% effective this year. Most years it's like 75, 80% effective. So that's a huge difference. That's 3 points of difference right there. The flu has a mortality of 0.1. This one, if it's contained, has a mortality of at least 1%, if not 2 to 3%. And if it's uncontained, in a runaway situation, it will go way above 3%. And again, even 1% means it's 10 times deadlier. 3% means 30 times deadlier. And the other thing is the flu does not spread asymptomatically, which means before you even have symptoms, it's not a worry. And neither did the old SARS. So for example, if you flew on a plane, you felt perfectly healthy, and 2 days later, you fly into LA to do your interview, and then you feel sick, you would only have to quarantine those around you when you were sick, not everyone on the plane or at the airport when you are still healthy. The problem with this virus is it spreads even when you have no symptoms. So even when you thought you were healthy and you're coughing or just spitting when you talk, everyone spits when they talk, you're actually transmitting the virus to other people. Again, some people are much more susceptible. So and apparently now that it seems that there's at least 25% of the people who are completely asymptomatic. In Iceland, which is the king of testing for this, just for comparison, Iceland tests 5,000 tests per 100,000 people. The US does about 300-400 tests per 100,000 people. Wow. We're at least tenfold lower than Iceland. And there they discovered that 50% of the people, when they test so many people, 50% of the people are asymptomatic. Wow. Which means this virus is literally spreading. Again, we know it's spreading asymptomatically. It's spreading silently in our population. And the flu, we also have treatment. Tamiflu, we have many other known treatments or drugs for the flu. For this one, up until now, we have no proven treatments that really, really work yet, that we know for sure works and know how much it works.
How long does it take to develop a treatment?
Like, it depends on what kind of treatment. There's existing drugs, which, we'll get to, hydroxychloroquine. And there's other drugs like for HIV and hepatitis C, for other viruses that we're testing. We have some hope that because they're already on the market, we just have to retest it for this one, as opposed to developing a brand new drug that takes longer. This is why the vaccine takes longer, because the vaccine, you have to go through the early safety testing and then the efficacy testing, and then, but now for the existing drugs, you can just test, we know it's safe, let's just test it for if it prevents COVID death. So, for remdesivir, the drug, we might get results in like 2-3 weeks. That said, a lot of these hepatitis C and HIV drugs are really expensive. And that's the problem. So we don't have, and hydroxychloroquine, it's cheaper, but it's very limited supply. It's originally only for people with malaria, which almost no one in America has, or lupus, which is really rare. So we don't have enough supplies of them, and they have extreme side effects, which again, some people are very, very susceptible. Some people are fine, but we need to know, like, does the known extreme side effects outweigh the benefits for it? So we'll hopefully have drugs much faster than we'll have vaccines. And one of the things I'm trying to work on is actually trying to speed up the drugs. There are a lot of bureaucratic loopholes. Like right now, the fastest thing you can do to find a drug is, hey, all you doctors and seeing hundreds of patients in New York City, I'm going to give you guys have like literally like thousands of patients a day, right? I'm going to give you guys this drug and give you guys a placebo randomly. And then in 1 week, 2 weeks max, you will be able to tell me if the drug works. Theoretically, if we had a drug that's already on the market, let's just say vitamin D, that's what I would do, because vitamin D prevents cytokine storm for other pneumonias. I would do that. But to actually carry out that trial, there is like a boatload of bureaucracy. Now, they're valid. They need to go through the FDA, go through institutional review board. You have to pay the fees to the hospitals and the universities. You have to, and then you have to wait for clearance.
Are we not tearing
for
down
the liability?
these
And if the patients get sick under your watch while doing a trial, technically the trial has to pay for it. But all these red tape could be just cut. You know, they're already in the hospital anyways.
Right.
If they waive all of these requirements, speed up the approval, and New York does not have to wait for FDA, theoretically you could do it much, much faster.
That's good. Right.
Like,
and we need to be doing that now.
You know, the federal government says marijuana is illegal, right? But a lot of states says it's okay. So there's many states in which it conflicts with federal law. Federal law says it's illegal. State says no, it's fine. And if New York did that and basically started waiving a lot of these requirements, you could easily get trials done very fast. And then if you told hospitals, stop charging fees, all you doctors are on the front lines, make it part of your job to test these drugs. It would literally, we could get results in under 3 or 4 weeks, theoretically.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated by this whole issue with COVID-19, that it's able to transmit during this incubation period when you're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
Is that rare? I mean, how does that work? Is this something that you see commonly?
Yeah, it's really common. It's well established. We saw it happening in January and February, and but now there's like a mountain of evidence. I think there's like 10 studies that confirms this now. It is like.
But do you see this?
It's not even a hypothesis anymore. It's confirmed. This is why CDC recommends masks.
In other words, how rare is this quality in viruses? Because it seems so insidious. It seems to make a virus so much more dangerous. How common is this?
It's a rare thing. Not many. The old SARS did not have it. The flu generally doesn't have it. There are some that has it, but I don't think it's not common. So it's just somehow very infectious. It's more of a property of some viruses, like Ebola or the old SARS. You only got sick from someone if they are extremely, extremely, extremely sick, and then they cough on you with a very high viral load in their very extreme sick state, then you'll get it. In this state, people have a viral load, and they're shedding these viruses from the body all the time. And it seems that you catch a little bit of it from a mildly sick person or asymptomatic person, you will get it. It just seems that the virus particle just hooks on much faster. And there's some evidence that basically this virus binds the receptors in your lung with a stronger affinity. It's like a much stickier glue, right? So if it's a much stickier glue, you only need much fewer particles to really induce something. We don't know the exact dynamics, but we know it's much infectious. And the other thing with incubation is, how they always say, isolate yourself, quarantine for 14 days? Well, that was based on an early study in China, but they did a reanalysis of some other things. And one study says 1 in 100 people will have an incubation period longer than 14 days, which incubation is from the time you get infected to the time you show symptoms and know that you are sick. It's longer than 14 days. And the point of the quarantine period is that if we're not sure if you're sick, if you were in close contact with a friend who was sick, you're quarantined for 14 days. And if you don't show symptoms, hey, you're okay. You're in the clear. Without even doing a test, you're in the clear. But there's a lot of people who basically get sick much longer outside of the 14-day window. And this other study said 12% of people who are infected develop symptoms beyond the 14 days.
So you
And
think
that
the
is a damn
quarantine
problem.
right?
Yeah.
Do you think? So what do you think the quarantine should be? I mean, how can we start quarantining people for like 30 days? That seems so
It's insane, yeah.
like
And
just
some people
over
are
the top.
saying 16, 18. Some people are saying
Just a little
21
extra,
days.
right?
Yeah, it's the problem is, like, for example, the first California case at UC Davis, that person who was transferred back and forth and finally got her test after like a long arduous argument. She got tested positive finally in the ICU, but by then she 120 UC Davis healthcare workers had to be like put out of commission for 2 weeks because they were in close contact without masks and everything, and many of them did come down with the virus. So this thing is it's serious. Like, the other key example is remember the Diamond Princess ship off of Japan? I like to tell people this anecdote. The Japanese quarantine officer, he's a quarantine officer. He knows about infections. He goes on the ship to inspect, on there for a few hours, comes off the ship, a few days later, tests positive. He's a quarantine officer.
Right.
And he knows how to take care of himself and protect himself, test positive. Another Japanese firefighter who's transporting really sick passengers to the hospital, from the ship to the hospital, was protected. After transporting them, he tests positive, even though he was protected.
Is this one of the most contagious diseases you've ever come across?
It's pretty contagious. Look, measles is more contagious. Measles has an R naught like above 10.
Wow. Okay. So there's a whole nother stratosphere.
But the difference is, most of us are immune because we have a vaccine for it.
Mhm.
So, in actuality, it's not as dangerous. If we had no vaccine for it and we had no immunity to it, it would be definitely more dangerous. But we have a vaccine, and most of us have immunity. Side note, for all those who are thinking about not taking the measles vaccine, here's a little interesting factoid for you. Unlike other infections, so normally if you get the flu or a common cold, your body remembers it. Your body has memory B cells. So next time I see it, I recognize it. Aha! I'm going to go into my memory B cell archive, bring out the antigen that recognizes it, and attack it right away, and you won't get sick. And this is what immunity is, right? I've seen this virus before. My body's built up resistance. Attack. So all these memory B cells hold all these old viruses that you've previously fought off. Hundreds, if not thousands, of viruses that you've had ever since you're a kid to your adulthood. Probably had been sick, with hundreds of viruses. Well, if you get measles, the measles wipes out that memory bank.
That's not good.
Oh.
Yeah.
It is really bad. So
I didn't know
every
that.
single disease that
Wow.
you built up resistance to, it deletes that entire resistance memory bank in your B cells. And that's why measles is extra bad. So please vaccinate. Don't get measles, because it will destroy all your life's work in building up resistance.
I wonder how anti-vaxxers are gonna be after this pandemic. Like,
Oh, they're
if-
gonna take that. They're gonna take
I
that.
think this is gonna
Yeah.
change some minds.
Well, what? How do you convince an anti-vaxxer to get a measles shot? I mean, well, short of a pandemic, let's hope that maybe this wakes them up a little bit. They were just living a little too
I hope
cushy
so
of
too.
a life.
Like a lot of the argument that the vaccine company, the anti-vaxxers say is, oh, it's just a corporate scheme to get rich, or it's big pharma scheme, or it's like these big billionaires in the world profiteering from it. These world leaders sitting in their thrones. How can we profit? Let's make people vaccinate. No, think about it. Who's dying? Like, you have famous people who are like dying, super rich people who are dying. You have the prime minister, you have the Prince Charles, you have Tom Hanks, you have Idris Elba, you have like everyone is getting it. It's like it's not like some conspiracy. Like, and look, we're shutting down, we're literally killing our economy, and spiking millions of unemployment and stock market tanking and the GDP crashing. That's not, in certain ways, that blows up any of this like corporate conspiracy theory about the vaccines, that it was all a big for-profit scheme. No one's profiting from this vaccine right now. No one in their right mind
They'll
would
figure it
blow up
out.
the
They'll
economy.
figure out some explanation for why not to take it.
I wonder if
Yeah.
scientists and people who do what you do, people like you, if you get personally offended when people are like anti-vaxxers. It's like we work on.
It is
Spitting
really
in your face, really, your life's work. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. Luckily, there's something called herd immunity, that if we immunize enough people, it's got herd immunity. Is like, for example, if you're in a crowded room, you're on this side of the room, I'm on this far side. You have the virus, I don't. But if most of the people in the middle of the room, most of them, by most I mean depending on the virus, but like 80-90% of them have immunity, then the chance of that virus hop skipping through the room to me is low, right? But if only 50% of people have immunity, oh, that virus is still going to find its way and to skip to me, right? So that's herd immunity, if enough people have immunity.
So they have the luxury of being anti-vaxxers because we vaccinate.
Yeah, they have the luxury that if enough people vaccinate, but it's dropping so much in some places that hence you have these measles vaccine outbreaks again, these whooping cough pertussis.
What do you think of that when you see that? You're like, there are outbreaks of measles and whooping cough. I mean, what honestly do you make of that?
I think it's really irresponsible. It's like how I see these people going on spring break in the middle of a pandemic, right? And having coughing parties and like, what are you doing?
But here's the problem: is that the way you just described the virus to me, unchecked, is a really horrific sight that nobody would want. These kids, they listen to the media, the president. There's a lot of people downplaying the severity, and frankly, also on the ground, they're like, "Hey, I don't see anyone sick. Everything's good here. Everyone's fine." So unfortunately, it's almost like a failure of imagination, and it seems
just of education.
Well, it seems like this kind of pandemic. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have this global pandemic like once every 100 years, and these kids, and even most people living today can't tell you what it was like to live through the Spanish flu, and so how can that
still alive?
Right. I mean, so who can really grasp what we're dealing with?
Yeah. So I think first of all, there's thing in public health right now. Like vaccines normally, when they work, like they're so effective. Like for example, let's take something that's more like less abstract. If 100 people gets injured or run over by cars at this busy LA intersection, gosh, we better put in a crossing signal or a sky walking bridge, right? And then after you put in a crossing signal or a sky bridge, the next year almost nobody gets run over at this intersection anymore. But we paid for, and then they're like, "Oh, we wasted all that money. putting this stupid sky bridge and putting this stupid traffic light here.
Mhm.
Oh, what were we doing? You know, such a waste. But thing is, if public health interventions are successful, the whole point is nothing happens, right? And you are exactly right on the failure of imagination, because you know, people appreciate medicine because doctors are like mechanics. Your car breaks down, your body breaks down, they fix it. Give you some medicine, give you some surgery, and then, thank you, doctor. You fixed my car, you fixed my body. But in public health, you know, the whole point is that you don't even get sick. You don't get that car accident. You don't get that measles. You don't get that heart attack that sends you to the ER in the first place. And everyone's blissfully ignorant.
Right.
And then no one says thank you. Who do I thank for saving my life today? I could have been run over.
Well, and
It's not like
even and worse yet, they'll call you a fear monger
exactly
when you're actually trying to.
exactly.
So
Certain
it's
ways, if public health intervention was successful and everyone had heard my big alarmist ringing of the whistle and the blowing the horn, and this epidemic was stopped in its track, they would have called me a fearmonger, because if public
Nothing
health
happened.
is successful, the outcome is nothing happened.
That's a tough job.
Yeah, it's a tough job.
And that's what's happening with the vaccine. Like, no one remembers measles, whooping cough. What is that?
Right,
Polio.
right,
What is
right.
that? No one has that anymore. It's like, you're making that up. No one's that sick.
Right.
You know.
It's the right. It's dangerous. But in a way, you know, maybe I think the world is kind of, it seems like, reacting fairly well to this pandemic compared to what the absolute worst case scenario could be. Is that it seems like even though we did get caught off guard and reacted slowly, on the whole, the world is working together. Each country seems to be doing, you know, at its own pace, relatively the right thing. Even here in the United States, every state is kind of, I mean, obviously some slower than others,
Yeah.
seem to be doing the right thing. So it's just, I mean, it seems much better than if this happened 100 years ago.
Well, yeah.
mean,
In certain ways,
it is
half the people
2020.
can still work because they can work from home and work remotely, right? And you know, you mentioned about, you know, every state has different like lockdowns. The problem is that we're also much more mobile than 100 years ago. We fly a lot. Our cars move way faster than horse and buggies than 100 years ago, right? Our trains are faster. And so what happens is, like, in the old days, if you had an epidemic in Louisiana, it'll take a while before it goes to Alabama, Texas, New York, and all the other places. But now one spring break trip in Florida can spread all these spring breakers across the country. And we've actually seen cell phone data of these Miami spring breakers and their cell phone signals of where they went to after that weekend was over. And the problem with the US is, like, not every state has a good lockdown. So think of a ship. If a ship has 50 holes and like 25 of the states, 25 of the holes were plugged, or even 30 or 40 of the holes were plugged with lockdowns, the ship is still sinking, right? Because the water will still get in from the other holes and still flood the interior of the country, interior of the ship. And so, because we have no real borders in the U.S., you can't put a border between New York and New Jersey and New York and Connecticut. It's just, there's no such thing as a border there. So you could have as tight of a lockdown, but if your neighboring state does not have a lockdown, the ship is still sinking and taking on water through the other holes. And that's the problem right now.
So do you see a failure at the federal level is our efforts here in California wasted because of Florida's, for example, refusal to shut down their state?
Yeah, it's not entirely wasted. I would not say wasted, but it is much less effective than it could be if we're all like on the team. Hey, I plug my hole, you plug your hole, and then we all stop this ship from sinking, right? taking on more water.
So which states are currently not locked down?
For example, Kansas. Kansas governor had ordered a lockdown, but the Republican legislature yesterday overthrew her lockdown. They overrode with a veto. So Kansas no longer has a lockdown.
Huh.
But I wonder if the people, do you know if the people there are, they're like, oh, well, cool, let's all go ice skating, whatever they do in Kansas. Probably not ice skating. Are the people there getting the message and observing
I'm not sure
protocol?
in every state. Every state a little different. And the other thing is, even the states that do have lockdowns, the lockdown order is half a page. The waiver and exemptions is like 2 pages long.
Right.
So you can visit grandma's, you can go fix your car. In California, by the way, there's also places where you can go, see a dermatologist because they're for profit and they are still open.
Are we doing enough here in America?
Family lives in Israel, and I hear their stories of what's going on there, and it sounds way different. But it
It's
is
nothing.
so much smaller that it's a
Different how?
difference.
What's happening in Israel?
So, for example, it was just Passover now,
Mm-hmm.
and they knew that people are gonna want to go to the Passover together with their family, so they closed all streets.
Oh,
So
wow.
no
Didn't
one
know that.
can go anywhere because it's on a government level. They ordered everyone.
Passover for reference is like for people who don't know,
It's
is like
a-
Christmas is for the Jews. It's a big holiday.
Not as fun, but it's
Not
a holiday.
way less fun, yeah, but it's the big one.
Or for example, another example, my sister gave me. She's at home with 3 kids, and it gets really hard to entertain them. At some point, she just went downstairs to the street just to go outside, get some fresh air, and a police officer came to her and asked what is she doing outside, why is she outside, and asked to see her ID and to make sure she really lives there in
Wow.
that building.
So, in your opinion, do you think the United States is doing enough to confront this?
No, absolutely not. Our lockdowns are crappy, but I think lockdowns. We can't have lockdowns forever. Obviously, what we have to do is lockdowns. By the way, are mitigations. They're mitigations by definition. Just a band-aid. What we really need to do is testing, contact tracing, quarantine. And by testing right now, I don't mean like testing when people get to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many testing right now. It's like New York City, they're so overwhelmed. They're only testing you if you get to the hospital. It's really bad. And so what you need to do is what I call frontier testing. At the frontier, the moment someone develops their first fever or chill or dry cough, immediately test them. And after you immediately test them, immediately contact trace where they've been, who were they with.
Is that even possible at the scope that we've gotten here in the United States?
We have to slow it down, obviously. Now, in Singapore and Korea, they have mobile apps that tells you, even if you don't know someone, that you were in that person's vicinity. Like you go to a restaurant, like you don't know who's at the next table next to you, but your mobile phone would know that, this phone was in a proximity to that phone for an extended period of time. And so in their app, they would directly communicate and tell the authorities that this person was in vicinity of that person. Years ago, I actually built this, for all the people who thought that, I'm not infectious disease. When the 2014 Ebola outbreak happened under Obama's watch, I was like, we have to build something like this because you're never going to know everyone that you cross paths with in a restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to have something like you share your location, and then if the next day, and it's saved, and the next day, if you or I test positive, then you go back in the record history and find in a path, who did you cross paths with in the last 7 days, right? And then, for example, if we didn't know each other in a restaurant and the location markers put us next to each other, 2 days ago, then it would notify me with a alert. that
But when you-
Eric was in your vicinity 2 days ago, but 2 days later you tested positive. And so that's how you do all like advanced contact tracing, and we might have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me, I just saw your knee. Are you wearing pants?
No, I'm not. I'm on a podcast.
Yeah, no, I don't expect to. I just saw your knee and I was like, oh, hello. I love it. Yeah, get comfortable. So let me ask you, it seems though that in the United States we are seeing a flattening of the curve. And we are seeing Dr. Fauci, who seems very credible, right? That he's lowering the death expectation. By all accounts in the media, it seems to be working. What do you forecast here? Because it sounds like you're saying, well, we're not doing enough, but it does seem like we're flattening the curve. So what do you forecast here?
First of all, we're not doing enough testing. So are we sure that we're doing enough? Because in many parts of the country, our testing is so abysmal, it's less than India or Bangladesh.
Right.
Well, it's on par with them, basically.
Even now.
Oh, yeah. Oklahoma, really low.
I saw a report, you can tell me, just today that the federal government was going to stop funding state tests.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
What is that?
They're using that, states will take over it. The federal, we want to give states more control, which is just another cop-out for the federal government to cut off the funding for that. I have no idea. It makes no sense. The
How do you
argument
cut
is we
funding
want
for
to give
that
states
right
more
now?
control.
I was perplexed by that too. I mean, that just seems very dangerous and irresponsible. I don't get it.
So the testing, here's the thing. We're not doing frontier testing. If I was, the other thing is, there's the cases that test positive. By the way, the test right now is only 50% accurate. It's only 50% sensitive. So which means there's a high false negative. There's a high false negative.
Our best test
my
right now is
God.
only 50% accurate? Is that true of all the tests in the world? Because I heard that the World Health Organization's test is like more accurate than that.
It's always, even in China, the test was about 30 to 70%. 30 to,
How is that helpful at all? I mean, how does that help? How is that better than anything?
if you're positive, you're definitely positive. If you're negative, you could still be positive a few days later.
But it's almost dangerous to send someone out
Right.
and be like, you're negative. They'll go out more emboldened and
Yeah.
less cautious.
I know, that's the thing. Like, these tests are deceiving because it's not just a property of the test, it's also the property of this virus. It's slow to build up its viral load sometimes. If you test early, you won't find it. And so it's kind of funky like that. And also, if some people don't sample it properly, some people just sample it gently up the nose. You have to. It's a very long stick. It's like almost like a chopstick length. You have to put it in your upper nose and then twist it horizontal to go all the way back to like up back here.
Oh my God,
Sounds awful.
Does it hurt?
And not everyone does it properly. And so,
Oh, it sounds awful.
and if you don't do it properly, you don't get a positive test because this virus lives in your nasal pharynx. Not
So why is it that if somebody breathes on me, I get corona, but the doctor's got to jam a rod all the way down my nose to get
breathes
it
on you because
reading?
you bring it up from there. You cough, you talk.
Can you not cough
use
on
your
it?
Yeah, can I
vocal
cough on this
cords.
thing?
You shake your vocal cords and you shake some particles loose to make sound out of your mouth.
I've also heard the ventilator is no walk in the park either. That going on a ventilator is actually a very traumatic physical experience on the body. Is that true?
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is. It's and
But it is-
sometimes they actually say you should use a lower pressure because they're using too high pressure on it.
What they do is they jam a tube into your lungs, right? So it's not.
Jam it through your vocal. It's like the intubation trick is to get it through your vocal cords without destroying your vocal cords. So that's why they have to use that like long, like little curved thing.
Are you unconscious when you're ventilated?
Usually.
So it's pretty. People say, "Oh, we need ventilators," but they don't understand how severe. It's a life-saving.
Yeah.
It's a life-saving equipment.
Yeah, I know. Look, this virus is bad, and so we know the testing is imperfect. We're not doing frontier testing. Like Korea and and Iceland did so much testing. They did frontier testing and as well as asymptomatic testing, right? And so these kind of testing allows you to like nip it in the bud early, contact trace early, stop this spread. Because by the time you have shortness of breath and go into, let's just say it's 1 week on average. Again, some people are longer than 2 weeks incubation. 1 week incubation on average, and then you have 1 week of fever and cough, and then on your second and a half week, then you start developing shortness of breath. And then you go to the hospital, maybe midway through that week.
You already infected 10
and you've
people.
already been infecting so
Right.
many other people, potentially. But if you had frontier testing, you would be able to nip these in the bud, find the contact tracing much earlier, and be able to stop it.
Do you blame China at all? The government of China. People are referring it to as, for example, the Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus or this and that. Do you think that's an unfair characteristic? And do you think the Chinese government could have done more to stop this? Do they hold any responsibility for this becoming a global pandemic?
To some degree, I would say, like in some way, this, I'm looking at the infectious property of this epidemic. It is so damn infectious.
Right.
Now, that said, I am definitely not happy with what China did because they tried to silence Dr. Li Wenliang, the one who's the whistleblower. They gagged him. They forced him to shut up. They punished him. And
Why
eventually
would
he
they
died.
do that? They
Why would
know.
they do
They
that?
know
Yeah.
about viruses. I mean,
Yeah,
SARS
they knew about this
originated.
virus. They
But why
knew
would-
about this virus.
So what do you make of them?
December.
What do you make of that response? It's just they
Did-
allowed it to spread, right? I mean, it's just
No
so
one
weird.
wants it. The instinct of government is, and politicians is, oh no, let's keep any bad news on the DL, right? And early on, they think that if they keep it on DL, it's like I'll take care of it behind the scenes.
Right.
We don't need to panic the public. We'll take care of it.
I see.
And it's kind of like, think of like Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs go on these clandestine missions, takes care of the things that the U.S. public does not want to know, right?
Right.
Like we took care of the terrorists. We don't need to tell people how close the terrorists got to getting the bomb, right?
What
I
is
got it.
what is the downside of panicking the public? Like,
The panicking is the political outrage. It's disruptive to society, but also it basically creates an air that these people are not competent. Oh, you let this happen, because oftentimes people have a tendency to blame any bad thing on whoever's in charge at the moment, and some things are clearly out of control. Like, for example, Katrina. Hurricanes, like, shit happens, right? But Katrina was a total botched thing. But early on in the Katrina, they tried to actually cover up how badly they botched the Hurricane Katrina. It is just a tendency for people to cover up their missteps so that it doesn't look politically bad.
So you're saying that even though China made an effort to cover it up, this virus is so contagious. I mean, I and the very nature of it, that it can infect people before symptoms show. I read something that 500,000 people had left Wuhan in a diaspora around the world before China even closed its borders. So the probability of it getting out was high regardless.
Yeah, it was bad.
Let me ask
There's
you-
no getting around it with it. But I
Yeah.
do think China could have reacted sooner, and there's been many articles about it. So could the China have reacted sooner? Yes. And could reacting sooner have slowed down the epidemic? Yes. But would there still have been an epidemic? I still think there would have been an epidemic, maybe a smaller epidemic. And now, are the Chinese numbers completely accurate? I doubt it.
Right.
It's just like, are the
But
U.S.
are
numbers
you
accurate? No,
implying
but
that if China had acted sooner, we would have a situation more akin to SARS, where it kind of just disappeared eventually? Or do you think that
SARS
this is
SARS was much easier to contain because it didn't have asymptomatic
Because you say there'd be a much smaller pandemic, so I wonder what does that look like compared to what we're faced with today.
Well, we had swine flu
Less
pandemic
death.
in 2000. We had the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, and we've had these, but again, some years they were more well contained, and the H1N1 could have easily overwhelmed the world as well had we not reacted faster. And Ebola could have been not contained. And so the other thing is in WHO, like how much fault does WHO have? I think WHO, by the way, most of the people who I know, some
World
who work
Health
at WHO,
Organization for those who
World Health Organization. It's a body of the UN. It's a division of the UN focused on health, right?
Now, I recall you screaming at them to declare a global emergency,
yeah,
and
public
were
health
they
emergency.
they were slow to the draw as well. It seemed
The
like.
tendency of a lot of these leaders is and scientific bodies is they don't act until they're absolutely certain. But they're the preparedness head, Dr. Mike Ryan, actually has it right. If you want to be perfectly sure about something before you act, if you want to have all the facts and completely, solid and as hard as rock certain before you act on something, you will always be too late. And so that's the other thing. Like in science, a lot of the academia types, like, well, that was one preliminary study. We need confirmation. It wasn't peer review. It needs to be confirmed by multiple studies and in many situations. We still don't know asymptomatic. For example, WHO had declared we do not know about certainty about human to human transmission.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's so many anecdotes that made it clear it was pretty human to human. But they don't rely on.
By the way, I remember they had sent out a tweet saying the threat of a global pandemic is very low, and if you're outside Wuhan, you shouldn't be worrying about this.
Right.
That and was already in Washington.
I remember that.
And so I was like, wow, they seem to really be failing us in this moment, because I think a lot of people, let's say people who are even distrustful of what our government tells us or the Chinese government tells us, would look to a body like World Health Organization and take what they say credibly.
And it's extremely frustrating because these big organizations are very bureaucratic and they're so conservative. They don't want to jump the gun on something, and it's really weird. Like, for example, France recently jumped the gun on something that told people in the middle of this epidemic, stop taking ibuprofen, stop taking Advil, Motrin, stop it, because it suppresses your fever, yes, but actually suppressing your fever suppresses your inflammatory immune response and allows the epidemic to grow even faster. And so the French ministry said, everybody stop taking ibuprofen, period, for any fever. And the WHO waffled, like, no, there's not enough evidence. And then they kind of wishy-washy gave an evidence, like, if you're not taking it, you don't try some other options first. If you're already taking it, continue to take it. It gives wishy-washy evidence. While France just went, stop taking it, and out of precaution. You know how there's this out of abundance of caution, we're gonna do this other thing, right? This more aggressive.
You have to act fast. I mean, sometimes you need to act decisively.
You have to act without 100% certainty.
Yeah.
You have to trust you have to read the tea leaves before it becomes a full tree, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't wait until the signal is blazing red, siren before you act, because by then it's already here.
By the way, ibuprofen for people listening is safe to take, right? I read something that was found not to make it worse.
This is where the grayness is.
Ah.
Yeah, so the grayness, France says don't do it. WHO gave this measly answer that says, if you're not taking it already, try other fever-reducing medicines.
So people should be careful consuming ibuprofen right now.
Are you asking me, or if I was the WHO?
I'm asking you.
I'm not a clinician, but I've studied ibuprofen for many years. Ibuprofen is known to cause heart attacks, by the way, just like Vioxx, to some degree. Ibuprofen, like the way I'm interpreting WHO's guidelines, the way they phrased it in this really weird, like cryptic way that you shouldn't take it if you should try to take other things if you can. They didn't say don't take it. They say take other things if you can. And knowing that that's WHO, I would probably, follow the French advice and not take it.
Don't take it. That's as close as
I'm
they're
not
gonna.
saying don't take it. I'm saying my gut instinct is I'm reading between the lines, and WHO does have doubt, but they're trying to hedge their bets.
Right.
And so, like, it's like if someone asked me, does chloroquine work? We don't know for sure if it works, right? Are there mechanisms? Are there really good case reports that it does work? Yes. At the same time, are there case reports that people having extreme reactions that the Swedish government says, stop, we're not offering chloroquine for any patients in our Swedish hospitals? That's also very valid. So I think if you're going to ask my prediction, I think chloroquine probably works to a limited degree for some people, but in the trial that's going to come out someday, I bet there's going to be huge adverse reactions that could offset the benefits.
Do you find it bizarre how heavily the president President Trump is promoting this drug? He's just giving people hope? Do you think he's just giving hope, or is it seems so bizarre for the president to be so strongly pushing one specific drug?
Yeah, it is weird, but it's kind of like Trump
just giving people
read
hope.
Everything out there. It's like sound bites and like selective information. Trump always wants to hear what he likes to hear, right? Like that's pretty obvious. You don't have to be political on the left or right. Everyone can tell.
Well, it's comforting to know, hey, if you're listening to the president, there's this miracle treatment out there.
Yeah, and the president probably is told by someone, oh, in this one report, it did work. And it's like, oh, great, it does work. But he doesn't know how science works, in which, okay, it's like there are people like James Burns. He lived to 100, smoked a cigar and like all these cigarettes a day, and drank whiskey every day, and he lived to 100 years old. Sure. If you took that as an anecdote, and you can probably find lots of people who smoked and lived to like 90 or 100, right? It's like, oh, look, he lived to 90 years old, 100 years old, and he smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. Are you going to find those people? Absolutely. But is that the overall picture? That's no, because overall picture is that, smoking cigarettes causes heart attacks and lung cancer and other cancers. But you're always going to find these extremes, like, oh, wow, amazing. Look, 100 years old person smoked a pack a day of cigarettes.
I want to zoom out a little bit, because the whole concept of a virus is very bizarre. Can you tell me what is a virus?
A virus is actually not alive. It's a particle of either an RNA or a DNA with a code. It's just a pure a strip of code covered in an envelope, okay? Which is, by the way, the envelope is built by the code inside. It cannot replicate on its own. It cannot reproduce. It does not eat anything. It does not poop anything. All it does is it needs to find another host's cell factory so that it could slip in while the factory is running, your own cell producing your own proteins, slip its code in there and make the cell's machinery read the code and make the virus's proteins, and so the virus is not alive. It is just a piece of code gone wild. It does not think of its own. It survives only to maximize its chance of slipping into another host and forcing the host to make its own proteins for it.
That seems so bizarre to me, that it's not alive, yet it has, like when you think of bacteria, for example, it's living and it reproduces, But how can something not be alive yet seek
Have
to
a
reproduce
purpose.
itself? It's just very weird.
It doesn't seek. It's a function of evolution, right? If it if it had a crappy piece of code, or if it's junk code, it's not going to go anywhere, right? It's not going to reproduce itself, and it's going to die out. So after billions and trillions of copies and billions and trillions of mutations, it's going to tinker itself in a way that is readable by the host cell, and it's going to make and this readable code is going to make something that will help it survive. Anything that selects for all these things will therefore live. That is life too. That is also in a way what we do, right? Like, think about it. Our ancestors till now, we are here because someone gave birth to us. And if our ancestor was infertile, was castrated in battle, or had some sort of polycystic ovarian syndrome that made their ovaries infertile, we would not be here, right? We are the selective reason for this. And I think the best reason is, look, name the vitamin that has caused the most wars and strife in human civilization. Can you name it?
The vitamin.
Name a vitamin or mineral that has caused more war, strife, and human suffering than any other vitamin.
I don't know.
It's vitamin D. The reason that Nordic people have lighter skin, Middle Eastern people have medium brown skin, and Africans have dark skin is that the more north you go, the less sunlight you get, direct sunlight. That's why it's colder up in the Arctic Circle. But that's also why there are more blonde, fair-skinned, light-skinned people in Norway, Denmark, and Scotland and Sweden than there are in Italy, in Turkey, and Greece, or Middle East. The reason for that is the dark skin prevents you from making as much vitamin D. So as these humans left out of Africa, which is we know that from DNA, it's in the code. You can't get away from that. And they migrated from the Middle East to Italy, to Northern Europe, to the Nordic countries. They had to evolve lighter skin. And the only reason they did that was so that their skin can continue to make vitamin D from the sun. Because a dark skin in Norway would never make enough vitamin D in the Norwegian sunlight.
Interesting.
Wow.
And so in certain ways, we evolved lighter skin and everything else from it. Racism, all these other kind of things that we identify with our tribal nature is because we evolved that. So the same reason we evolved lighter skin in northern latitudes and darker skin at the equator, it is the same driving force because we need vitamin D. And if you don't evolve lighter skin in northern latitudes, you will die because you will not get enough vitamin D, you will die. And over time, you select for only people who have enough light skin mutations that led to their survival in the Nordic countries. And that's the same reason a virus survives, because it knows nothing but random gibberish of codes. But out of all these random gibberish of mutations, it will select the best thing that will allow it to survive. And that, over time, becomes the perfect virus.
Just a total random number generator running all the
Random
time.
number generator, but is selected for survival by the forces around which it lives.
But where does it come from? How does a virus? How did the first virus come into being? I mean, where do these things come from? What is it? I mean, you said what is it, but I mean, what? How did it come to be that these things are floating around?
That's a really good question. You could also ask, how did we come to being from primordial soup?
But it seems almost so. The origin of the virus is as mysterious as life itself, and it even seems to be almost like an antithesis of life as we know it, almost.
but it is part of the world we know it. We are the same evolutionary functions that drove us to be from, quadrupedal to bipedal, because bipedal people can run faster. Um, um, these same forces allow us to survive. And I think that is the ultimate evolutionary message, I unfortunately have to leave soon.
Okay, good. I'm coming to. How much time do you have left?
Probably 5 minutes.
So let me ask you this then, briefly. Let's close it up here. What do you have? What are the misconceptions? What do people need to know from you right now to protect themselves? What are the most important things they need to do to make this better for them and really as for the country? What do we need to know?
I think what we need to know is, look, we need to do testing. We need to basically know that certain people have more susceptibility, right? If you are diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, any lung disease, any immunity disease, you should be extra careful, in addition to if you're old. Because, a lot of people are asymptomatic and healthy and mild, but if you have any of these things, like I said, a diabetic person has 17 times higher chance of being ICU admitted than someone who's not. And these are the realities. We have to know these risk factors. At the same time, this virus, if we lift up the lockdown, we're going to have a resurgence. We're going to have to find a way to identify everyone who has been previous built up immunity. That's via sero testing of virus antibodies. And there's really good evidence that if someone who has survived donates their blood plasma to someone who's sick, it actually improves their health. Not a randomized trial yet, but good anecdotal evidence that a lot of people believe. And these things, basically, those who have immunity can potentially go back to work someday. And we're going to find ways that if you are super healthy, zero risk factors, or you have immunity, we can find ways for these people to go back to work. And we can open restaurants and movies and movie theaters soon, but we have to find ways in which to do it slowly. We cannot reopen, have sports games again, and full capacity movie theaters again. Those are days of the past. Until we have a vaccine, we just simply cannot do that. And so we will get through this. It will change our society forever. The year 2020 will be the year in which our society evolves to a higher level of appreciation for universal healthcare, potentially. That, actually giving that guy healthcare, make sure he doesn't get sick, is actually protects me and my family. I think people are finally waking up. I better have government pay for his healthcare, his COVID, his treatment, so that he doesn't keep infecting me because he can't afford to go to the hospital and get tested, right? I think we'll have huge ramifications there in terms of a way we see a society. And I see a lot of conservatives coming around to that too.
Finally, I don't want to keep you too long. I want to ask you one last question because I know you're in a hurry, so I don't want to mess up your schedule. Can I order out food?
Yes. I would sanitize it when it comes in your house.
How?
Either with bleach wipe, or you can use. There's UV wands, by the way, are really good.
What?
UV light kills the virus very quickly.
Yo, I gotta get a UV wand. That
One of
sounds
those
awesome.
UV lights or UV lamps. And the other thing is